This video replaces a previous video I had about windshield wiper repair on an S10 pickup. This video goes much more in depth as far as the removal and installation of the wiper motor and also disassembly and repair of the wiper motor. My 1997 S10, the wipers wouldn't part from time to time when you cut them off. So I had seen online that there were some problems with ring cracks around the solder joints around terminals on the circuit board, so I thought I'd check that. And sure enough, when I removed the motor and took the circuit board out, I could see ring cracks around some of the terminals on the front edge of the circuit board near the wiring connector block. After I closely inspected all the solder joints, all the soldered connections, all the terminals, I resoldered some connections where I found ring cracks around the terminals and replaced the board back in the motor. Well, after repairing the circuit board, a few months later, I started having the same problem, and it got worse, and it got worse. It got so bad it wouldn't park at all. The service manual recommends replacing the motor and the circuit board, but we'll see if we can get around that. Rather than replacing the motor, we'll try to find the exact problem. If you choose just to remove the circuit board, here's how you do that. It's a little tricky to get to. There's 3 Torx screws, and the small arrows shown here in the photo are where the 3 screws are located. 2 of them are on the outside edge of that circuit board cover, and one is pretty well in the center of that circuit board cover. The 3 cover screws are Torx T20. After removing the 3 screws from the cover, grasp the black terminal block and pull straight out, and the board and the terminal block will be removed. This circuit board is available for about $25 from several different manufacturers. The entire motor assembly is around $60. The prices quoted are 2012 prices. As little as the price difference is, I would not recommend using a reconditioned unit. 3 screws that hold the cover on. The 3 terminals shown here at the top of this photo are the ones that need to be resoldered. I resoldered all the terminals shown here by the red border. I found an additional problem underneath these spring contacts that control the park. On the other side of the circuit board, there's a ring crack. There is a ring crack around the spring terminal shown in the previous photo. I did not catch this the first go-round. Here is an extreme close-up of that ring crack. I resoldered both connections where the spring contacts are soldered to the circuit board. I resoldered both of them heavily just to be sure. And this is the GM part number for that motor. Okay, let's start to remove this motor. Remove this cover as shown. You may want to make a reference mark on that arm and shaft. This shaft is splined, but there is no master spline. Remove this screw as shown here and lower the hood and lift straight up on that right cowl piece and it'll come out. Under the right cowl vent piece you will find 2 screws that retain the entire section of the cowl vent that goes across in front of the windshield. This photo shows a clip on the left and right cowl pieces. Remove all screws from the main cowl vent piece that goes across under the windshield. Disconnect the electrical connector shown here. This photo shows the wiper motor arm and the wiper transmission or linkage. You can carefully turn that arm and hold that arm with a pair of vice grips and loosen the nut on the motor shaft with a 13mm wrench. This photo shows the wiper motor arm with a ball stud. I won't be using this. Remove the bottom motor screw first with a 10mm deep socket and a ratchet. Then remove the two top bolts. This motor can be run by laying it on top of the engine. In my case, this wiper motor would park sometimes, so I made a reference mark showing the park position. This is very important. Since I won't be using the new wiper arm that came on this motor, I'll be using my old one. I needed to measure to know exactly where to mount that mounting arm on the new motor. Before you mount the wiper transmission arm on the motor as shown here by the measurements, turn the wiper motor on and off several times to make sure it parks, and then turn your ignition switch off. Then I removed the new wiper arm as you see here and attached the old wiper arm on the transmission where you see it in the background. I attached it using the measurements shown here. Hold that wiper arm with a pair of vice grips as shown in a previous photo as you tighten the 13mm nut on the motor shaft. Use a drop or two of thread locking compound on that nut. This photo shows the point at which the measurement was taken on the wiper arm. Now we'll go inside the motor itself. Make a reference mark on the motor and the housing as shown here. This park connector plate controls how the motor parks. This photo is looking down inside the motor housing, showing the bushing for the motor armature shaft. Not a bearing, but a bushing. Also shown are the two permanent magnets, and they chip very easily, so be careful. And now you can see the armature and the motor housing. This is a permanent magnet type motor. This photo shows the brushes and the holder, the white holder. To remove the armature, you have to remove this white plastic plug shown here on the right. Then the threaded portion on the left can be unscrewed. This sets the armature in play. When the end plug is removed, push in on the armature shaft as shown here and you'll see the E-lock, and remove that E-lock. Now the housing is empty except for the driven gear and the park plate. Now you can remove the armature and the brush plate. Please note the location of the spring and where the E-clip goes. On the left, of course, is the armature spring. I resoldered all these terminals that you see on this little brush circuit board, just to be sure there was no problem. Carefully tighten the three connectors shown in this photo with a pair of needle nose pliers. Ensure that all three brushes move freely in and out of their holders. I believe I'm telling you correctly when I say that this brush shown is the park brush. Also, there's some electrical components that I believe are for radio suppression. By that I mean eliminates noise on the radio from operation of this motor. The brush holder is retained and grounded by two little torque screws located where the arrows are shown here. Clean this area. Also shown is the bearing for the armature, which I would guess is a ball bearing, possibly a roller bearing. When you have replaced the motor and linkage, turn the switch off and on several times to make sure that it parks correctly. Then install your wiper arms in the park position. Use a little bit of locking compound on the two nuts that hold both arms. Then test your wipers by using a hose, running water down the windshield to prevent any scratches or damage to the blades. Never run a wiper on a dry windshield. Run your wipers on high to make sure that they don't hit against the cowl or against the edge of the windshield. And if they work correctly in intermittent, low and high, and you're satisfied with the operation, you're finished. Normally you would hear Summer Place, the song, at the end of this title, but that's not allowed by YouTube. Hope you've enjoyed this video. See ya.